Welcome to another edition of the Civ Battle Royale, Part 49, The Red Dawn. My name is Dawkinzz, and this is a lost episode of Part 49, which we unfortunately had to skip, being that Burger Krieg and I were busy for some time, and those that agreed to help us out kind of fell through. So, better late than never, we'll continue with Part 49. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Civ Battle Royale Part 49. Here to serve as your narrator today is yours truly, Sledge115, loyal Korea supporter, usual sub-commenter, and first-time slide narrator. Where we last left off, the Buccaneers' warmongering have finally caught up with them, resulting in a wave of declarations of war from numerous civs from across the globe. The Mughals and the Maori are eliminated, and South America is deadlocked in a gritty meat grinder of a war between the resident powers, Brazil and Chile. Who shall come out on top this time around? Let us begin. Our title card today is by Lord Baconus. Our most recent map of the world is made by our resident cartographers Laxaraxariscal and Malistrasa. Pay close attention to the current hotspots of the planet. A city today might be gone tomorrow, as Yakusha painfully found out in their conflict. Finally, we have the Boers rightfully reclaiming their top spot. While they have been laughed at and mocked at for their dormancy, pay no mistake, their armed forces alone constitute the most powerful entity in the BR. Read all of the power rankings in the description below. Our journey kicks off with a shot of the most recent of the Chilean-Brazilian wars. Buenos Aires has flipped again to Brazil, and a group of Chilean units have been pushed back against La Plata, threatened with catastrophic losses. However, a sizable Chilean fleet is just off the coast, and with scarcely a friendly ship in the water, it's unlikely for the Brazilians to hold on to Buenos Aires for long, not without ample support. In spite of the numerous declarations of war, there has yet to be a task force from any of the numerous participants large enough to challenge the Buccaneer Corps, as shown by an Australian digger hopelessly surrounded by Buccaneer land forces near Laredo. The first wave of Canadian troops have arrived at the Texan border, ready to engage the last garrison of the Texan army. But along the way, they pass a peculiar group. That's right, the Inuit now have power armor infantry. These powerful frontline soldiers are sure to consolidate the White Walkers' clutch on North America. It's cannons and riflemen against Great War infantry and artillery as Haile Selassie of Ethiopia continues his rampage across North Africa, slicing a huge chunk off Hannibal of Carthage's dwindling empire with the capture of Congo de Nalza. With even more reinforcements arriving from the rear, Carthage looks increasingly unlikely to defend their depleted corps. Where's the rest of them, though? A lone Buccaneer caravel celebrates their victory in the frigid north. Where we last left off in this tiny corner of the world, a Malayan caravel was unfortunate enough to be caught between the Corsair and the caravel. Ouch. Enough of that. That's rum to be drunk and plunder to be split. Who needs these fancy steel-hulled destroyers when you have good old-fashioned wooden ships? Seriously though, the captain needs a promotion back home. I'm not sure he's even seen home in some time. Bernard O'Higgins of Chile enters the atomic era. With research on atomic power available, it could prove to be the game changer in their ongoing conflict against the Brazilians. Buenos Aires flips back to Chilean hands. It's the real prize of this war, and both Bernard of Chile and Pedro of Brazil are absolutely keen on holding on to the devastated city. The overwhelming artillery and air support Chile has around the fortified city of Castro might prove to be a difficult hurdle for Brazil to pass La Plata. Just off the coast of La Plata, we see a dashing Brazilian helicopter pilot eager to engage wooden ships with superior firepower. He promptly realizes his terrible mistake as Chilean sailors mock him from the nearby battleship. He will be missed. A shot of the fertile Brazilian core. Meanwhile, from Hanoi, Semiramis reports back with news of the Trung sisters' plot against Pedro's interests. Whether or not it will amount to anything remains to be seen. Not to be outdone by Semiramis, Ishtar reports in from Stockholm, Sweden, informing us of Gustavus's plot against Harun al-Rashid of Arabia. Surely he must have noticed the increased Finnish activity in the region and plans to seize those delicious Arabian oil fields before Kekkonen's paratroopers can get there. Iceland enters the information era, bringing forth a colorful new age of technology, wonders, and weapons of mass destruction in Europe, or at least their side of Europe. For now, Ingolfur of Iceland and his hardened sailors remain quiet, but pay no mistake. The fleet is large enough to challenge every single European power bordering the Atlantic and North Sea. And with air support too, no less than 3 atomic bombs and 7 aircraft squadrons stationed in London. Anyone declaring war against Inglefur is just asking for it. Seriously, he's got enough air support to conquer almost all of Western Europe in one fell swoop. The first contingent of the Stop Offshore Piracy Alliance arrives under Australian banners, sailing towards Tulum, a valuable stepping stone for anyone attempting to invade the Buccaneer homeland. And to the south, a flotilla of privateers, led by a destroyer, engage a lone Buccaneer submarine in the first opening shots of the Australian Buccaneer War. Henry Parkes must be ecstatic. 4 paratroopers exiled from Sweden watch from their encampments as Siberian Yakut forces continue to clash fruitlessly in the frigid Arctic wastes. Unless another front is opened, I don't see the Siberians or Yakuts progress past this meat grinder, and with a lack of air support, there's nothing left to do for both sides other than send in a gunship or 2 across the mountains. Such is life. Meanwhile, further to the east, the Inuit bring in their newest advance in naval technology to the front lines, a missile cruiser. Unfortunately for the Night's King, Ekanik, he'll have to do a bit better than that to overwhelm the sizable Yakutian navy. Across to the Kamchatka Peninsula, however, it would appear that the Trung sisters are following in the footsteps of Kruger and Kekkonen, with Vietnamese forces spilling all over the area. Even as a Korean supporter on my end, I have to admit their recovery has been remarkable. Ah, such a shame. Canadian troops withdraw from the Texan border as Lester B. Pearson makes peace with Sam Houston. Texas lives to fight another day yet again. You have to admit their diplomatic tenacity even in their vestigial state. But of course, there are still others waiting for the day Austin waves their colors, such as those eager Mexicans right across the border. Iceland shows off their new mechanized infantry, showcasing their tech superiority once again. With 90 strength, they vastly outclassed the still abundant 50 strength Great War infantry fielded by the other European powers. Finnish angry birds be damned. Across the Atlantic, Icelandic workers show off their new communications array in front of their jealous Canadian counterparts, a superior version of those old-fashioned trading post huts. With +3 gold per array, they will prove useful in supporting any war effort Inglefur undertakes. The meat-grinding South American War continues with no end in sight. Bernard secures Tiwanaku to the north, and Pedro's army looks lacking in melee units, save from some scattered paratroopers and a lone Great War infantry at the front. Unless he commits more troops, he won't be able to hold a coherent front, and will risk a shittier border gore than the last time those two met. Well, it would seem that the Inuit are hell-bent on lighting the biggest fire the North has ever seen. Another bomb has been dropped on Yakut lands to the disbelieving eyes of the Vietnamese and Boer personnel. Far from being horrified, however, they decide to take notes on the use of atomic firepower. Surely some upstart neighbor could use some cleansing. Speaking of atomic power, let us move on to Sydney, the Emerald Down Under, bastion of the Trans-Pacific Australian Empire. They've grown back to +15 population, and were it not for the everlasting fallout on the mountains, one could be excused for believing this bustling city has never bore witness to the all-destructive power of the atom. Sooner or later, Henry Parkes would have that power, and the Pacific will tremble once again. The victorious Finnish army set up camp around their newly acquired city of Gyansi, once Tibetan, then Mughal, now Finnish. It's worth noting that another newly acquired city by the Finnish of Agra is home to the Statue of Liberty, a wonder that provides +1 production for every specialist. In the hands of a peaceful, scientific, and progressive freedom civ, it's a valuable asset. In the hands of an oppressive, militaristic power like Finland, however, it's a game changer. Akbar stares silently at the fallen bastion of freedom, laughed at by the Finnish machine gunners stationed in the city, before retreating into what's left of the Mughals' legacy, a trio of submarines, a worker, and a great musician. Well, at least he has music to accompany him. And here we see exactly why having the Statue of Liberty in the hands of Finland would be bad news. Finland's carpet is massive, and backed by their production boost of the statue, every unit lost is hardly a crippling one. Now, if only he'd turn his eye towards another vestigial empire, Stalin's USSR. But of course, this is Kekkonen we're talking about. He'll probably declare war on France first, and it'll be raining men on the Seine. A lone Arabian scout sets up camp in the Mongol enclave of Ulaanbaatar, as we see who's who in the North Asian balance of power. We have Kumcha Khan's Sibir Khanate, backed by what could be the largest armored force in the world. Unfortunately, he can't move it past those upstart Mongol troops stationed on the border. Genghis of Mongolia has a weird sense of humor. Next we move on to the Boers, those orange and blue. Oh right, they're not exactly from around here anyway, so let's move along. Tigan Trigger Dakan of Yakutia, a long-running top contender. Most of their army appears to be off-screen. Oh, for goodness sake, put some meat into it, Trigger. Those boars are laughing at you behind your back, to be honest. What is this travesty? The king in the north, Ingolfur Arneson, has declared war on Azor Emau, the fool. Doesn't he know his true enemies lie to his east and west? The Lion Gustavus and the Inuit White Walkers? And so it begins. The Battle of the Atlantic commences. Malian and Boer ships engage the first Buccaneer ships on the front. It's wood versus metal, iron, and steel. The seas shall be stained with blood and oil, and the skies will burn. In spite of the numbers, the Boer Mali fleet present are outmatched against the pair of Buccaneer destroyers, and that's not even counting the naval task force they're keeping in reserve further north. Of course, the bulk of the Boer fleet is lying on the other side of the continent, and the war has only begun. Of note is the sizable Moroccan navy patrolling the seas off of Saleh. Should they join the war on either side, it would make or break them. Tiridates of Armenia enters the modern era. He would need to upgrade his army and improve his core, however. The only civ that matches them in technology by military alone seems to be the neighboring Persians, and that's bad. Great War infantries form the backbone of all of the surrounding powers, and Tiridates would be wise to modernize his rifleman army. He's still at war with Sweden after all. Sooner or later, a stray Swedish infantry will come along after thousands of years of navigating their way through the densely populated region. Now that's a sight for sore eyes. The nations of the world agreed to construct the International Space Station even with all the wars still raging on. This is quite the uplifting news. Of course, this uplifting announcement is shown along with the utterly ridiculous shot of the truly massive Boer army present in Yakutia. Seriously, they outnumber the Yakut ground forces on their own lands. Here's Sir Kruger declaring war on Ekanik with the cover of peacekeeping duties. On the other hand, the other half of the UN members vote on banning citrus, a valuable commodity for sailors. Things don't look good for Henry Morgan's men with the threat of scurvy on the horizon. The Wabagong Armada Task Force sent to invade the Buccaneer holdings in South America grow larger and larger still, and soon they'll be all over the coast. With scarcely any naval units close by, the Australians are sure to flip a city or two with their invasion force. Unless Morgan mobilizes his Atlantic fleet to intercept the task force, the coast of South America may be painted green as the Kimberley and Maori before them. The Trungs continue their plotting, faithfully monitored by Semiramis. Their next target, Tiridates. Clearly, the advancement of another nation to a new age of discovery is too much for the sisters. Like the Boers and the Finns before them, the Vietnamese have covered their lands in a sea of red and green, an army large enough to rival the Sibir and Mongols in the north. Before long, we may see another war engulf East Asia. In spite of the Wabagong presence, Morgan still has a trick or two up his sleeve. Make that 4. Haha. 4 atomic bombs poised to strike at the Australian fleet. With the memory of the Maori strike on Sydney still fresh upon the older officers' minds, the fleet hesitates in their advance. But the board is set and the game is on. Tulum shall be theirs to take. What the fuck, Sejong? Seriously, what? He's done it. His Majesty has done it. Good Lord. China's days are numbered. That's all I can say. Mother of God. Sanchi's note? As Carthage burns, Ethiopia rises. Quilu falls to the red and a great war infantry is at the gates of Carthago Nova. I fear this is it for Hannibal. The days of the elephants are long past, and with not a single melee unit around, every capture made by Salisi is theirs to keep. Unless the Boers or Mali intervenes, there's nothing left for Carthage to do but wait for the blade to strike. Help them, Cossack. You're their only hope. Olangapo, the eastern stronghold of the Blackfoot. No one really expected them to swoop in out of nowhere, but here they stand, a solitary watch for the men of the New World. The Vietnamese continue to pour everywhere, and soon enough all the Blackfoot men are staring in jealousy over their fancy new rifles and parachutes. On that note, how on earth are they occupying Olangapo's tile? Did the Blackfoot declare it an open city? The Emperor of the French has awoken. Soon his armies shall march with triumph into the lands of Afghanistan. Well, it's something. With luck, they might be able to squeeze in a few armies through the gaps across the continent. Oh well. As advised by his counselors and Mamikonians, I will have to Wikipedia search that later, Tiridates has decided that autocracy shall be the new way of life for the Armenian people, in the hopes of protecting himself further from the wrath of Sibir or Arabia. That's all they can do for now, really, along with Persia. Chile makes peace with Brazil once again, and with a scarcely changed border. Once again, Pedro has failed to claim what should have been his all those years ago. Really, the war served nothing but to weaken both Bernard and Pedro's armies. The Andean mountains are simply too treacherous to pass, and the Brazilian core is far too deep to be invaded. For now, South America slumbers yet again. Or not. The Wabagang Armada's might is unleashed upon Morgan's vanguard of Tulum. Should it fall, it would give Parks a valuable foothold for his fleet to resupply and strike again and again at the black heart of the Buccaneers. Where will he go next? The vast yet unprotected Gran Colombiar or the Nassau Canal? However, Morgan's not going down without a fight, and the power of the atom is within his grasp. 5 atomic bombs in Tulum. 1 is enough to cripple the Wabagang. 2 will destroy them once and for all. But will it be enough to stop the endless fleet of Henry Parks, streaming in from his trans-Pacific Empire from the Sunrise Land to Sunrise Coast? Oh, sweet Jesus, Maria the Mad has declared war on Morgan, in spite of her advisors and common sense itself. The Buccaneer-held Iberia is nearly empty, but that Buccaneer destroyer is not going to sit still and watch the Madden Queen take her ancestral lands once again. Well, they'll go out with a bang. Good to know you, Maria. Another one! This time the Trungs have rightly decided to correct Mirwais of Afghanistan's god-awful borders and then some. Even as a Korean supporter, I salute their just cause, because honest to God, Afghanistan's borders are just the worst. Balk and Mawalabteen are set to fall to the Vietnamese with their overwhelming paratrooper corps, and then they shall reclaim the mandate of heaven. 'Tis a glorious day for Vietnam, it is. I've summed up their strategy too soon, because Jalalabad is also within striking distance. With only a handful of artillery and a lancer to defend the city, the entire eastern side of Mirwais' empire is at risk. His air force is certainly large enough, but with the sheer number of Vietnamese soldiers pouring in through the Himalayas, I don't think they can kill them quickly enough. Tulum falls to the red, but not before the Buccaneer Air Force station there is evacuated to nearby Huamanga. A group of Buccaneer ships attempt to halt the Australian advance, but it's too little too late. If Morgan plays his cards right, he should or could drop an atomic bomb right at Tulum as it falls in the depleted Wabagang fleet, annihilating them in one swoop. Victos, meanwhile, falls to the red under heavy carrier-based aircraft bombardment, with the destroyer looming behind the carrier group. No sign of the main Buccaneer fleet, so for the time being, Parks reigns supreme over the South American coast, and the coveted Nassau Canal is within his sights. The Ethiopians continued their ruthless advance, taking both Cathargo Nova and Kiwilu. Ejura falls to the red, and it's only a matter of time before the first Ethiopian soldiers reach the gates of Carthage itself. Prime your F keys, ladies and gentlemen. With no single melee unit to be seen, there's literally nothing Carthage can do other than stall the Ethiopian advance long enough for a foreign intervention. Amidst the carnage and bloodshed in South America and North Africa, the International Space Station is 50% complete. I'm absolutely sure that either the Boers, Inuit, or Sibir are focusing all their production to gain yet another technological lead over the rest of the pack, because they're clearly not strong enough already. Speaking of technological leads, I think there's an ancient group of Mexican composite bowmen somewhere in this slide. The Battle of the Atlantic rages on, and the Buccaneers are absolutely trashing the combined Mali-Boer fleet. Mansa Musa has a few ironclads in reserve, but judging from the look of things, they are, for the time being, stuck in Timbuktu until Ahmed al-Mansour of Morocco decides to open his glorious Gateway to Africa open borders for Mali. As the Chilean Navy conduct naval exercises, the last Maori admiral watches in bitter silence, lamenting the could-have-beens and never-weres of the Maori Empire. They could have been great. They could have challenged the Australian might. They speared the god-forsaken devil itself, a shame it will never forget. They fell all the same, or the vengeance of Parks was terrible and swift. Wiping a single tear away, the admiral retreats to the depths of the submarine, hoping to find news of Te Raparara's whereabouts in the vast, unforgiving ocean. Sorry about that. Damn them all. The Boer military proudly show off their newest accomplishment, the drone fighter. Boasting a strength of 100 compared to the jet fighter's 75 and a range of 12 over the latter's 10, these are the ultimate in air superiority, fully securing the Boer dominance of the technological arms race. But that's not all Kruger has to offer. Behold, the mech artillery, the ultimate city killer. With a ranged combat strength of 90, it will pound a city to oblivion before it's realized what's hitting it. And what's more, it can carry 2 missiles along for the ride, adding to its tremendous firepower. Be afraid. The drone fighter is the last in a line of units dating back to the days of the humble triplane. Instead of oil or aluminum, however, it requires nanomaterials, enabling mass production. Same is the case with the mech artillery. It is, after all, a great descendant of the humble catapult and robust artillery. Unlike the drone fighter, however, it requires aluminum to run. Pay your final respects, ladies and gentlemen. I don't expect to see our old friend Chairman Mao around after this part. The paratrooper nearby is within striking range and Shanghai is in the yellow. Godspeed, Chairman Mao. Well, I'll be damned, Hannibal's still got it in him. Hannibal gives up most of his rapidly collapsing empire to Haile Selassie, reducing him to a 2-city vestigial empire. They're not dead yet, but I don't expect them to make any major moves in the future. So for all intents and purposes, I take my hat off to the once Punic Empire. They had a brilliant run, bouncing back from a massive tech disadvantage to create, however briefly, an empire spanning from Devin in the Sinai to Carthage in Tunisia. We'll miss you, buddy. Well, will we see a double elimination again this part? Funchal falls into the yellow under Buccaneer bombardment. Maria desperately makes peace with Ahmad, but it's all too late. Her suicidal attempt to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula backfired horribly. Alexios must be proud. Send a foraging party. The siege begins at sunrise. It won't be a siege, Your Grace. Korean lancers, the whole lot of them, charging across the plains. Chairman Mao knew the day would come. He draws his sword forwards. His advisors promptly knock him out cold and drag him inside. They promptly realize their horrible mistake when a Korean anti-aircraft personnel storm the walls of Shanghai and amazingly capture it. Shanghai falls. China still has a single night to reclaim Shanghai, but with an amount of overwhelming firepower, Mao won't live to see another dawn. It's the bitter truth. Senchi's note, I think John Lennon said it best in Revolution 1. If you go carrying pictures of... The Yakuts bring their new and improved infantry. It's like normal infantry, but mechanized. With an additional 20 strength over the infantry's 70, it could prove to be the unit that they need to hold the line. Isset has been recaptured, and from the looks of it, there's hardly an Inuit unit nearby that can recapture it for them. A huge detachment of the Ice Sheet Fleet outnumber the badly mauled Yakut Navy by a margin of 3-1, but with all of those pesky new Vietnamese peacekeepers in the way, they won't be able to pass Kamchatka. The Yakut land army looks incredibly small for an empire their size, but the Inuit have yet to bring a sizable enough army to the front lines. Looks like the war is slowing down, just like the recent Brazilian-Chilean wars. Meanwhile, across the country, Yakut workers brag about their new skills by building their first communications array. Not much has changed in the Sibir-Yakutian front, not unless the Boers move out of the way or the Mongols declare war on the increasingly empty neighbor. Pelham falls to the red under heavy Australian bombardment, but they seem to be lacking in actual city-capturing units. Indeed, the Wabagang detachment sent to invade the Buccaneers has all but disintegrated with hardly any reinforcements, except for those submarines to be seen. Well, it seems I spoke too soon about the Australians. The Buccaneer holdings in Central America look distinctly untouched, and apart from the fact that their ships can't leave port without being torpedoed to death, I'm sure Morgan's not all that in a haste to fortify it. The USSR looks increasingly screwed with every Finnish unit spilling into Siberian lands, and those Siberian atomic bombs look scary as hell. Wait, you're kidding me, right? You're kidding me? Semi, dear, how could you miss the part of the Vietnamese plan? The Trungs decide to end Chebang once and for all, and somehow they've dragged poor Kamehameha into the mix? Don't ask me how, they just decided to. Things are looking very dire for Champa, giving the overwhelming Vietnamese superiority by land and by sea. It won't be pretty. But hey, at least those pesky border gorers are going to be fixed, right? Right? South America, peaceful once more. Both Chile and Brazil lick their wounds in preparation for the next gritty meat-grinding war in the continent, but they'd better do it decisively this time. For now, Buenos Aires remains firmly in Chilean hands. In the Atlantic, a flotilla of buccaneer destroyers intercept and harass an Austro-Malayan naval group led by Stead Bonnet. The gentleman pirate rubs his hand in anticipation of the legendary wealth of Mansa Musa, but for that he'll need to move north. Bamako over there looks like a very juicy first blood target, and with the overwhelming number of Malayan Gatling guns, it'll be easy enough to hold. Vietnamese paratroopers pass their Finnish counterparts as they march across Afghan lands, in their quest to fix the Afghan border gore, of course. Ma Lam Win Yin Yibret and Seng Yang Zam Zangbo Badop are firmly in their grasp, and Balk is on the verge of flipping over to the Trungs. A solitary Champin Lancer faces off against a Vietnamese paratrooper just outside the city. Amaravardi falls to Vietnam, Thili Bin Nai drops to the yellow, and even my son has taken damage. Chebang Nha's days are numbered. That border gore with the Kimberley is preventing him from effectively mobilizing what's left of his navy to protect his holdings. Warning, I will butcher the Ethiopian leader's name yet again. Realizing that the real enemy hidden in plain sight has been Sitting Bull all along, Emperor Haile Selassie declares war on the real mastermind behind the Pirate World War. It could take some time for any Ethiopian units to arrive, much less take Madewankantawan. Speaking of which, it seems to be recovering nicely in pop. Unlike the Union's brief revival, the Sioux have a chance to actually develop, and Sitting Bull's already building a new, archaic army, but an army nonetheless. Mexican soldiers marvel in awe at the Sioux longswordsmen, the first to walk the earth since centuries ago. Well, fuck. Al-Mansur has decided to finish the job Leonidas and Salasses started. What the Spartans and Ethiopians could not take, he will claim. With an overwhelming force of Great War infantry at the front line, there's a fair chance we'll see another elimination this part or the next. Once again, the title Ahmad al-Manslaughter shall belong to the Sultan again. Prime your F keys, ladies and gentlemen. And we have liftoff! In a brief moment of levity from the conflicts and wars to come, the International Space Station has been launched. Kumsha Khan puts his production to good use and gets the top spot, with 3,000 production lead over the White Walkers. And apparently the wars declared on him aren't Morgan's main concern. The Colombian holdings he owned must be quite the boost. Surprisingly absent on the list are Uro Kekkonen and Paul Kruger. What are the Finns and Boers up to? Benito Juarez decides he wants to join the nuclear club and leads Mexico into the atomic era in anticipation. An atom bomb or two will enable him to compete partially with the White Walker supremacy in North America. We can only but hope. The very lovely Agent M has uncovered a plot by His Majesty Hierarch Sejong in Seoul behind Taigen's back. That unicarpet was certainly no mistake. He's seeking to reunite Pyongyang with the rest of the empire. Rumor has it that a megalomatic dictator has taken a foothold in the city's politics. All jokes aside, the Korean army is large enough to begin spilling into Yakat land, a testament to their power. If Sejong declares, he should be able to seize some of the cities with citadel-based borders, like Gyeokgyor and on an airbase on Hiroshima. I wouldn't worry too much about the Vietnamese army just below the screen. The Korean Air Force stationed in Suwon is large enough to hold off whatever units the Trunks fling across the border. Also of note is a naval detachment of the Ice Sheet Fleet slowly making their way around the Kamchatka Peninsula. They simply won't give up. Ishtar brings us with more promising news. The Lion in the North is busy plotting against Stalin's vodka-intoxicated men. He'll need more than the Air Force station in Corinth or those units waiting in the border, though. Get a proper carpet, Gustavus. The Inuit bring their jet fighters to the front line, hoping to gain total air superiority over the Yakat airspace. The nuclear-irradiated Yakat lands are looking dangerously empty, with only their navy waiting in the Arctic Ocean. If only Ekanik could bring his actual land units. That'll teach him to leave their lands empty. Genghis Khan leads Mongolia into the atomic era. Mongolia has been surprisingly quiet for an empire with their historical reputation, but his unit carpet is diverse and advanced enough to compete with the likes of Korea and the Boers present in this shot. Yakutia does look like a juicy target. If the Boers are teleported out, I don't see a reason why Genghis can't take a city or two from Taigan. Cross your fingers. Also, Kamehameha is warned by Salisay of Sitting Bull's master plan against Henry Morgan, and accordingly declares war on the false shepherd. Amaravarti flips over to the Champan side once again, but a nearby SAM unit isn't going to stand still now, is it? Champa is valiantly holding their ground, but Vietnam has so much more to throw at them. It's not going to be pretty. F. Henry Morgan claims the rest of the former Portuguese Empire and reaches out deep into the Mediterranean. With only 2 melee units remaining, Maria the Mad is simply unable to recapture Funchal. Portugal had some promise in the Renaissance, but eventually they proved to be too small, too isolated, and too boxed in to reach out and expand their influence. Another Phyrexis Civ is down for the count. In celebration of this victory, the Buccaneers enter the Information Era, even more naval units to marvel at. Those former Corsairs must be excited just thinking about it. And boom, Amaravati and Thili Binai flips over to the Trungs. A single privateer is all that's left of the Champan Navy, once a proud navy protecting an empire stretching from Manila to North Sumatra. A helicopter gunship looms threateningly over Maisan, and with a carrier group nearby, the city will be bombed to rubble. Sooner or later, the Kimberley's turn will come, and the region will be painted green. The Vietnamese conquest proceeds smoothly in the west too. Vietnamese paratroopers secure Balkh, Peshawar is within range of their army, and Jalalabad is in serious danger of flipping next part. As much of a Korean supporter as I am, I have to admit that Vietnam has proven itself to be an East Asian version of the Boers and the Inuit. If they keep this up, their empire will stretch from modern-day Afghanistan to central China. Anyways, from the looks of it, Peshawar should be their next focus. Should the Vietnamese hold it, it will open the floodgates as they break out of the Himalayas barriers into the Afghan core. Pay close attention to the region. I guarantee it will see the fall of another power. Our old favorites, the Australians, enter the Information Era. Stagnated for a while, they soared back to prime form with their brutal conquests of the Kimberley and Maori, securing a very stable core. The nuking of Sydney seems to have left Parks traumatized, though. Where's their Manhattan Project? Not to be outdone, the Ethiopians are led into the atomic era as well. Exciting development in North Africa here. The Moroccan army flips Utik over into their hands, and Carthage drops into the yellow. With only a few riflemen and cannons facing off against the overwhelming strength of Ahmed al-Manslaughter, Hannibal has nothing left to do but wait. And alas, my time is at an end. We end this part with a shot of the Finnish core swarming with Kekkonen's globe-trotting angry birds. Exciting development all around, and I believe the best is yet to come in our Part 50 milestone. Will Hannibal live another day? Will Chairman Mao punch his way through the Koreans? Find out next time on Civ Battle Royale. Statistics, and more statistics. The Boers lead the pack in population, with Australia recovering healthily from their still-fresh nuking of Sydney. Those Maori holdings are extremely fertile in good old sheep after all. Creeping up in 13th spot is Morocco, surprisingly enough. The usual suspects down below, but what's curious is Mexico. Despite being one of the major powers of North America, they don't seem to have the large population that goes with it. They're below France, for goodness sake. Carthage is reduced to just Carthage, flinging it all the way down here. The war with Ethiopia was truly a disaster they will never recover from. Australia leads the way. Their Trans-Pacific Empire earns them the top spot in territory, and who knows, should they gain a stable foothold in South America, they will become an empire where the sun never sets. Of course, they also need a colony in Africa, but fuck it. Same case goes for their cities, all scattered around the Pacific. Australia's got a 17-city lead over their nearest competitors, the Inuit, while Sibir and the Boers mark a large difference in city count as well. It's always nice to see our favorite city-states. Hannibal joins the club over down here, and Chairman Mao is, for the first time since the BR began, absent. F again. The Boers' science lead is absolutely staggering, a 5,000 science lead over the 10th spot. Other than that, it's the usual suspects, including, of course, the one civ with a science-based UA, Korea. Canada, surprisingly enough, is creeping up at the bottom here. Pearson's learned his lesson from his war against the Inuit, it seems. The world's armies in glorious statistics. The Boers, again, lead the pack with a 600,000 manpower lead over the Cyber Khanate. The Wobbegong might is shown with Australia occupying the 3rd spot, and with the exception of Yakusha, all the civs in the top 10 are 1 million men strong at least. Catholicism finally takes the lead over the longtime leader Judaism, but of note is Islam. It has returned at last. We close this part with a religion map. The world's last unconverted lands are finally being graced by missionaries, and curiously enough, in the Middle East, it seems that Islam has somehow taken a foothold in Jerusalem. And finally, here we have the 3 migrations theory retrieved from Pretoria. Written by Boer scientist Jan Riker nearly 40 years ago, the theory receives new coverage from Australia, as reported by Johan Smuts. Read it all up. Image by Anarcho-Syndicalist. It's been quite the lengthy part, one of the longest even. I patiently await for our 50-part milestone. Who knows what glorious events await us next time around. It has been an honor serving as your narrator this part. I am Sledge115 signing off. And with that ends yet another audio narration. My name is Dawkinzz, and thank you again for waiting so patiently for part 49. We'll see you next time.